Joining us now on the phone is Senator Marco Rubio. He is on his way here to the west coast of Florida to meet with President Trump, and he has been doggedly attentive to the needs of his state during and after Hurricane Irma. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for your coverage on this, guys. I mean, I think it's really important what you've done, even leading up to the storm. A lot of people watching on the news decided to leave because of the coverage. So I think that this was an example of where the media really was very important in getting the word out. So we appreciate that.
That's the job, Senator. So let me also pass along from the Keys that the people hear what you are saying to the extent that they're getting information. They need you and they appreciate your efforts. So they know what you're doing to help them in Irma, and we're going to talk about that. But let's deal with this issue because I know it matters to you and to your state. Do you think there's a deal or there is no deal with the Democrats on DACA?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't in that meeting, but I'm about to see the president, and as the moment is appropriate, I'll ask him directly. And here's the thing. I said it a couple weeks ago. I've always believed I wants to deal with this issue and help these young people and do it in a responsible way. And obviously the details of it are important. But a couple of weeks ago when the decision was made, I said, look, it would be really important if the president kind of laid out what he would sign and what he wouldn't, which creates a sort of guidance for the legislative fix. But it's an issue I hope we'll deal with, and I believe we can deal with. And if the president is ready to announce sort of the parameters of what he's willing to be supportive of, that'll be a big step forward in achieving that.
One more beat on this. What do you say to people in your party who say if he does anything on DACA that keeps those people here, he's a fraud? And what do you say to the notion that the wall should be a non-starter for Democrats in doing any deal on DACA? Address those 2 points.
Well, border security is a fundamental responsibility of the federal government, and a wall is a part of that. It's not the only part of it. A significant percentage of people in this country illegally don't cross the border. They come in on a visa, so you've got to deal with that. And I think a broken legal immigration system contributes to it as well. And as far as DACA is concerned, I don't think the president has ever said he wanted to round up and deport young people educated in this country, brought here as children. I think he's consistently, over a period of time, expressed his desire to do something with them differently than perhaps what some people perceive. So now he's going to have to do it in a way that ensures this never happens again, and we're not incentivizing people to do this in the future. But I've never gotten the feeling from the president that he was gung-ho on kicking dreamers out of the United States. I've gotten the opposite.
Except when he had the AG come forward and talk about how they're all illegals and that they're hurting the economy, which isn't even true in many contexts, and it made it into a little bit of a policing matter. That seemed to send a signal that the dreamers were vulnerable.
Yeah, again, the president has consistently said that, I've heard him say it a number of times. He told me personally it's an issue he'd like to fix, and it's fixed in the right way. And so, again, look, I have always operated under the assumption that that's what they wanted to do. I think the reason why we got a 6-month extension or a 6-month period is to give Congress the opportunity to work to fix it. They could have just immediately ended it and slammed the door shut if that's not what they wanted to do. But, again, the details are what's important. As you well know from covering this issue can get complicated very fast the more things you add to it.
Well, especially if we allow politics to add things to issues that could be kept clean. Let's use that as a segue. It'll be interesting to hear what the president says to you about the DACA situation. You're always welcome on the show to discuss that. But keeping a matter clean and uncorrupted by politics is going to be essential to keeping the flow of money to your state to address the needs of Irma now, 3 months from now, 3 years from now. What do you think of that?
Well, we have short-term and long-term needs, okay? The short-term needs are the emergent situation of reimbursing local governments for the cost of doing what they're doing, getting individualized assistance to individuals, getting small business loans for people down in the Keys, a lot of small family-owned businesses, some for generations. They're not going to have customers for a long time. It could wipe them out. That sort of emergency funding is not overly controversial. There's maybe a dozen people in the Senate that vote against it no matter what, but that's something that's overwhelmingly popular. Where we're going to get into a problem is if we use this as an opportunity to pay for long-term projects that may be related to the hurricane, but are things that should be done as part of the regular budget, not as part of emergency funding. So that's my goal. Let's do the emergencies and the emergency funding, and then the long-term improvements, things like mitigation against sea level rise, things like that, as part of the long-term normal budgeting process.
Sometimes they wound up dovetailing, though, right? I mean, that's what we saw with the Sandy funding. You had certain members of your party attack it and say that this was pork, and that really just wasn't accurate. And it wound up really stalling something for months that could have been done quickly.
Yeah, but let me tell you part of the Sandy problem. Okay, Sandy funded hurricane airplanes, which I support. You know, these improved airplanes that can go out as hurricane hunters. But that's a long-term project. It's related to the storm, and it should have been funded, but it should have been funded as part of the regular process, not as part of the emergency funding. That's the way I'm approaching this. It's what I'm telling it. Look, Monroe County needs an emergency operations center. You know, they don't have a standalone one that functions the way it should. We should help fund that, but not as part of the emergency funding, as part of regular funding. And I think people will be supportive if we do it that way. I really do. I think it's the way to do it, because those long-term projects deserve more scrutiny. And that's why, you know, in the aftermath of Katrina, where there were examples of monies that were misspent, is what's really kind of triggered this. We don't want to continue to contribute to that.
Right, but sometimes something may not seem like an emergency in the moment, but winds up being so fundamental down the road. Like, look at the money that you guys put into your infrastructure with the cement poles that carry a lot of the power network in the Keys. I was just down there. Those poles largely are still up. That's going to make a huge difference in reconnecting power. You know, it wasn't central to the funding mechanism at that time, but it wound up being fundamental to helping this rescue effort.
Right, and again, I'm not saying we shouldn't fund them, and certainly when it comes to those poles, they're largely funded through utility fees in the state. But again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do them, but to the extent we're going to do those things, it should be part of the broader long-term. Just because, look, it's the right way to do it. That's what I don't want to see is suddenly, you know, FEMA funding being used as a Christmas tree where people hang their own other projects that may or may not be directly related, because it slows it down, and we can't afford any delays. You know, FEMA will run out of money here fairly soon, given the increased clip of spending. And so we just want to be able to act quickly on the emergency.
Hear you. Hollywood, Florida, and what we're seeing in the nursing home. There's some really troubling questions here. The most relevant one early on is going to be, why didn't they transfer these people to the hospital? And that question is begged by the series of 911 calls. You know, these weren't citizens. These were standard of care. You know, these were caregivers who supposedly would have had better acumen than what was exercised in this situation. How do you deal with that? And one of your larger questions?
Well, I think this storm has exposed a real vulnerability in our senior system. We get reports from all over the state now, 4 or 5 days without power. It's not just nursing home. We have an ALS in Collier County where the people just didn't show up. Staff just abandoned the patients. The storm was looming, and so some university students had to bring them in and shelter them. You have people in Miami and Hillsborough County, all over the state, living in housing facilities that are senior citizens with no power. That means their food is spoiled, their elevators don't work, so you have people trapped. This storm has exposed a very dangerous vulnerability in our network of senior care. I was emailing with Susan Collins this morning, Senator Collins is the chairman of the Aging Committee in the Senate. I'd like for us to really look into that issue, maybe even hold some field hearings if possible, to study this from a broader perspective, because there were examples of this as well in Harvey. And we've really got to look at how resilient is our senior care system after a natural disaster in which power could be out for an extended period of time.
Important questions, no doubt. Senator, thank you for joining us. We look forward to discussing these issues with you going forward, and we hope all your loved ones and friends made it through the storm okay.
They did. Thank you for that. And I look forward to being back. We were in the Keys the day after, and we look forward to getting back down there tomorrow. It's going to be a massive rebuilding effort, but the Keys is going to come back. It's going to come back strong.
Well, that's the hope down there, but boy, is the need great. Senator Marco Rubio, be well.
Yes, sir.